question is, to what extent can we combat U.S. capitalism in forging social barriers between social classes? So the significance of our question, capitalism is still relevant today because it acts as a primary engine for wealth and it just creates innovation. Uh, why hasn't this problem been solved yet? Capitalism has been very far integrated all the way up to probably before or after the industrial revolution, sorry, up to today where it is still integrated into our society.
Okay, so right here, this information comes from the article "Why and How Capitalism Needs to Be Reformed," published by Harvard Law School. Right here, this is a graph showing the income share of top 1%. The income share from top 1% relative to the bottom 9%. So this is the income share, and you can see all the way from the late 30s to now, the income share is at its highest, and that means like the wealth gap is the most significant, and that's dating all the way back to the early 30s or like late 30s, which was ironically around the time where like World War II was happening. Here's a quote: "Today, the wealth of top 1% of the population is more than that of the bottom 90% of the population combined, which is the same sort of wealth gap that existed during the 1935 to 40 period." So then again, that just shows how capitalism widens the gap between wealthy and poor, which to me is pretty unfair, because that means that the rich are becoming even richer and have an unnecessary amount of money, and the poor are getting like very little to absolutely nothing. Um, Here's another graph. So these people here, it's just a graph like off of wealth. These people here are ordered in poorest to wealthiest, going left to right. Um, and this is the actual distribution of wealth in the U.S. because of capitalism. So right here on the left, the amount of money that they're getting is little to nothing for the poor. And you go all the way down, see the middle class is getting just slightly more, and then it skyrockets when you go to rich, and it's just like 40% of the wealth of the entire country. So you can see that like the wealthy are getting like an unnecessary amount of money, because they're able to abuse and take advantage of the effects and like perks of capitalism.
Okay, so moving on, as you mentioned, the people in power through politics. Um, the next aspect is wealth power. So essentially, the people in power in capitalism because of their wealth. It's a cycle that's been repeating, as April mentioned, with Industrial Revolution. That's when capitalism began to get popularized, and so it's been repeating over and over and over. These capital classes, they amount to a surplus value, and therefore the employers abuse this. The workers are only paid what they need to keep reproducing, and the employer always enjoys the profit. And also secrecy. Wealth power obviously gives you assets, gives you connections, and therefore this secrecy is what allows them to exploit their workers. They find loopholes to be able to avoid their taxes. They're able to manipulate the system in their favor. They always win, essentially. And this mindset really, it's a burden really to the working class. So moving on.
Okay, so for our urgency and effect, um, essentially capitalism is prioritizing profit over people, so they're not really taking into account the people, basically the majority of America, as obviously the upper class tends to make up 1% of the population, and those are the richest people. And they're not really taking that into account, so they're really just thinking of what's benefiting them as a country. And um, one-sided reformations on lower classes. So essentially things like minimum wage don't really allow people to grow in their income and how much like they can't grow in social rank because they're just getting the same amount of money constantly. And so because of that, there's no way for them to grow. And so the upper class will continue to grow. They're not working at minimum wage jobs, obviously. Whatever they're doing is making them continue to gain more money. And so that just shows the unfairness in the social gap.
Another, as I mentioned before, the exploitation. I actually have evidence to support this. Ballotpedia, it's essentially a website that's it's not how obviously correlated to Wikipedia, but it specializes in politics, like elections and these new campaigns that the government does. And one of these actually specialized in Prop 22, which had to do with capitalism. Essentially, this company, a rideshare company, decided to qualify their workers as independent employers, I believe. And so with this, they lost a bunch of their rights as the workers of the company. Uh, their minimum wage, their insurance, and essentially this like negative impact, obviously, in this exploitation, it furthermore leads to other examples of how they're exploited, like their work days. They work awful hours, awful days, and actually another source supported by it's called Wheeler from 2018. They did a survey of I guess the mindset of people who miss work. Essentially, they hate this because they don't like the effects that comes from missing, what the effect on the business, and in total, even the Republic side doesn't encourage missing work days because of the outcome. That's already 50% of the population. And transversing into the futuristic lens.
So in terms of the future, there were, in my opinion, three different impacts that could greatly impact us. One of them was techno-feudalism. What techno-feudalism is basically a digital form of capitalism favoring big digital platforms like those up there, Google, Apple, Amazon. It's just big digital platforms. Kind of think of it as a hierarchical position, as in these digital platforms being at the top of the pyramid and those who need financial stability at the bottom of the pyramid. Sorry. Another impact was work precarity. This is something that affects us today greatly. Essentially, what work precarity is working very, very long hours and getting paid very, very little. Not only does this affect us in like society, but it affects an individual in their own personal life. Like as an article from Work Rights Central says, this elevated like people to have social isolation, financial stability, and eventually cause depression. The third most impactful effect that it can impact or worsen in the future were environmental effects. Not only does capitalism hurt our economy, but it could also hurt the the air that we breathe. It releases CO2, carbon emissions. This is a lot that was seen throughout the Industrial Revolution, like what Brandon restated. If we do not fix this for the future, these are the three things that could worsen. Okay, so a possible solution to our issue is a concept called inclusive capitalism. Essentially, it allows more equitable access to sources that the upper class have to thrive. Like an example of those sources would be government-supported institutions of corporate finance, banking, insurance, reinsurance, and favorable tax and monetary policies. So essentially, it's keeping the capitalist system that we have, but it's allowing the lower class to still have a chance to grow in the social rank. And it extends to lower competitive access to government-supported institutions.
So through our research, we looked through this aspect of four different lenses. We have political, ethical, socioeconomic, and futuristic. we put them aside, we had a conversation about it, and in total, our main solution to how to combat capitalism, or the US capitalism system, is transparent tax reformations. Um, Limitations and other solutions, as Lisa mentioned, we have inclusive capitalism. It's really a mindset though, because inclusive capitalism, it really like separates, distributes equity, and everyone's really equal in the system. But as pre-established rules, this mindset, as I said, little impacts on the system will cause big changes, big reactions. Obviously, we have the right to protest. This system, which so many support, it's going to take a very careful approach to it in order to fix it for the better. So, with all our research combined, we managed to amount to this solution. And so, our research, transparent operations, really, it's a small step, but I feel like it would make a really big impact in these industries. It'll support loyalty, because essentially, as I mentioned before, in the ethical lens, secrecy. There's a lot of conspicuation amongst employers. This will build a healthy work environment, loyalty to the workers, to the employer and the workers, and also it will share the success between everyone. Every document that's signed, every decision made in the work facility, I feel should be known by everyone, so that way everyone can work in this trusted environment. And another thing is an asset tax. Essentially, obviously, you get taxed based on your income in the capitalist system. I believe that it should also be impacted by an asset tax to promote balance, and also a little research study by Peter G. Peterson Institute. It shows that 0.06, just by taxing that amount who has over 50 million, it would make a huge impact on distributing the wealth equally amongst America. Um, I mean, this capitalist system obviously provides a lot of money, but in distributing it, it's really hoarded by the elites in the system, the political ones and the wealthy ones. And the tax credit, this would be like kind of a safety net program, as April mentioned. Um, Anyone who makes 40K or less a year, obviously we could help them out. These safety net programs would be available to them to improve their financial situation. And a part of that would also be taxing, as part of the asset tax, it would be taxing inherited wealth from the wealthy, because that's actually not the case right now, and I feel like it would also balance out the system a little more. Thanks.
Good job, you guys. Okay, questions, Brandon. Questions. You guys got to back up for the questions. All right. Now that you've rearranged, Brandon, you become the first question. How did your group decide to include, and then you can pick any other student's perspective, lens, or conclusion into your overall presentation?
As I mentioned in the solution, I wasn't going to pick April for this one. She was the futuristic lens. She picked her lens last, so essentially all of our lenses really fit in this. And then we wanted to end it off with, obviously our solution goes at the end. And I felt the best lens to be able to counteract this would be the futuristic lens, how we see this in the next couple of years. And so with her findings, we found the safety net programs. And obviously we didn't exactly mention the environmental changes, but I feel like her portion of the research was really crucial towards finding our end solution. That's what I mentioned.
Fantastic. Abril, give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about one of your other group members' findings.
I feel that learning about, also including my futuristic lens, I feel that learning about like the political side of things also like just really defined like the unbalance of society, and how like the system can be structured. I kind of like it kind of shaped my thinking into like seeing more of like the people and how they're individually affected and how they can be affected personally. Yeah.
Fantastic. Ms. Sweet, what is an example of a compelling argument from one of your partner's individual reports that you decided to exclude from your guys' presentation, and why?
I would say an argument from Brandon was probably talking more about
like things we could change socially, and I feel like we didn't talk that much about social separation. I think we mostly talked about like tax and solutions and what we could change. But I think we excluded it because I think that our main focus should be what we should change and how we could change it instead of focusing on like what the main problem is now and just focus on how we can move forward and change that as a society.
Fantastic. Thank you. The last one, Sion. Give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result about, nope, I already asked that one. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem your group identified?
I think out of everyone in my group, I think Brandon had a great impact on what we were looking for. Um, his ability to research things, I think, is far beyond what all of us can do, as well as he knows exactly what he's looking for, and the things that he found, I think, definitely helped us in what we needed to look for, and in um, what like solutions we could pinpoint in our presentation.
Fantastic. Great job, you guys.